This morning, we're going to talk about a person, and we don't know his name. We know almost nothing about him. What we have is a book he wrote, and I apologize if it's backwards, but it's called The Cloud of the Unknowing. It was written in the 14th century. They believe it was by a monk, but they don't know. It could be a woman, it could be a man. They just don't know. But what they do know is this book hits a bit of wisdom that's profound, just absolutely profound. So what it basically is this gentleman, or this person, wrote a book and said that between us and God, there's this cloud, and the cloud is a cloud of unknowing. We can't know God. We can't get a visual idea of him. We can't capture him with reason. I heard recently, I can't remember who said it, but what we cannot do by reason, we can do by rapture. And what they meant by that is in deep prayer, we can get closer. And that's exactly what this author would say. And he would really hold on to the idea of via negativa. It's Latin, but what it basically means is through the negative. So we can know what God is not, but we can't know what God is. It's like that's not something we can get our head around. And as we get our head around it, we typically go to a wrong place. Whether we're an atheist or whether we're the most pious of believers, our image of God is not too good. My image of God is not too good. But what the author says is that doesn't mean we can't get something of closeness to God. We can. And the way we do that is letting go of our reason and trying to use love to make that connection. But no matter what we do, the cloud between ourselves and God is always in there. And it has a lot to do with the incomprehensibility and the wonder of God. But God, the reason we can't get him in our heads is God is not a concept. What cannot be thought of can be known. It can be known. God can be known by love. To do this, he talks about contemplative prayer. He talks about wrapping ourselves in a cloud of forgetting. Now, I do myself a fair amount of centering prayer, and it sounds like that's kind of what he's talking about, where he says in this cloud of forgetting, what you have to do is just put everything out of your mind. You're sitting there, you're praying, you're trying to reach God, but you don't think about anything, you don't say anything. I guess we could say we listen, but to be honest, I don't hear when I do this prayer. But you can just say a simple word like God or love as things are coming into your mind, to keep them out of your mind. And just to go to that level of awakeness, of waiting for something to come to ourselves. And doing this type of centering prayer or contemplative prayer with a spirit of forgiving or a cloud of forgiving, is just the first step. We can get closer and closer as we form this love of God. And it's not for everyone. Not everyone can do this. And as a matter of fact, when he starts his book out, he wants it to be kind of secret. He doesn't want any old Joe to be playing around with this, because it's a serious type of connection that we're trying to form. And you have to be serious about it and go through that work. It's a little bit like this cloud of the unknowing is interesting because the author himself becomes unknowing. But he says a lot of it has to do with nothing, that nothing is part of it. Here's a quote. It says, "Well, you will say, where am I to be? Nowhere, according to you, and you will be quite right. Nowhere is where I want you. Why? When you are nowhere physically, you are everywhere spiritually." And this author does such a good job of describing this path and all the different ways we can try to pray and just connect with a love of God, that he has a way of disappearing himself. Isn't it interesting? He or she makes no reference to themselves. And it's like you get the impression that this author had a wisdom. Thomas Merton once said that as soon as you kind of get along in the spiritual path, you get so far, you have to break it all apart, let it all go, and start over again. Doesn't that sound hopeless? And yet, in trying, we get a sense of the greater of everything. We get this putting down of ourselves and putting ourselves away. It's an even better way of saying it, putting ourselves away. And then we can be exposed to the presence of God here, where you're sitting, here in our day. Let us be blessed by the presence of God.